I love Charlie Chaplin, and I love his character the Tramp too. This semester we read the chapter from Andre Bazin about what Chaplin's character does to get a laugh, the rules he gives himself, and the way he interacts with objects, society, and even time. Watching more Chaplin films only strengthened the argument, and then I got to thinking, is this analysis of the Tramp extend further to other silent film comedians? My mind went directly to Buster Keaton, whose physicality is more extensive than Chaplin's, but still seems to achieve his comedic goals by manipulating the same methods. This makes sense. Both are from the same era of filmmaking, and both probably learned certain techniques from each other. Then I ran into the issue of both being too close to each other, and a third silent comedian, separate from those two, would solidify my argument. I optioned to choose Rowan Atkinson's character, Mr. Bean. He is 60 years removed from Chaplin and Keaton, and also exists in a cinematic world where his character actively chooses to be silent, with the exception of uttering his name once in a while.
Bean.
And wouldn't you know, Mr. Bean follows similar rules with his comedy, just like Chaplin and Keaton. At first, Bazin notes Chaplin's use of objects around him to further his goal. In our world, things are tools, some more, some less efficient, but all directed towards a specific purpose. However, they do not serve Charlie as they serve us. Charlie frequently uses objects in weird and interesting ways in order to subvert some problem in a humorous manner. They are never very effective or permanent, but working in the moment is good enough for the joke. Keaton follows these similar rules, except they are magnified and exaggerated. Keaton uses entire environments, buildings, and vehicles in unique ways to get himself out of a conflict. Keaton runs, jumps, and climbs around anything he can like an old-fashioned parkour acrobat, to the point where you could almost swear he was a cartoon. And in the same vein of Charlie, these feats of manipulation are never forever, and sometimes end poorly, ending with Keaton taking an embarrassing, but nonetheless humorous fall. Mr. Bean allowed his object repurposing to be much more subtle. He allows himself to manipulate one item many times, evolving it on each permutation. When the subtle movements have met their tipping point, the scene usually ends with a much larger gesture as the final punchline of a gag. Mr. Bean uses the same technique when using environments, but instead of climbing them, he plays with them until he thwarts it or it thwarts him. The other similarity with all three is how they interact with what Bazin calls the realm of the sacred. Bazin discusses that he is referencing to all the social cues that we take for granted in our society. Charlie is guilty of this to the point where you feel real pity for him, whether it be a social cue that goes over his head, or how he carries himself in public, sometimes causing stares in his direction. Charlie has his own rhythm, and it seldom matches with the rest of society, but he's fine with it. If something is missed, there's no time to dwell, it's always off to the next thing. Keaton falls into this pattern as well, except his characters are constantly trying to adapt with societal norms, and his constant failure begets the jokes. Keaton imitates others only to find that he is either unable or doesn't understand what is happening. Other times his character is thrust into scenarios completely outside of his comfort zone, leaving Keaton to either adapt or avoid. Mr. Bean exists on a sliding scale between these two on his social aptitude. There are times where he's very Chaplin-esque and he becomes a very innocent and playful version where normal rules don't apply to him. He goes into these situations head first and more times than not ends up getting chastised by another normal character calling out his absurdity. In fact, all three of them are chastised in one way or another when not following the rules of society. They exist to shine a light on an individual's mistakes and quirks that all people are guilty of, and still have us laughing about it for generations.